ある山間の小さな村に侍の墓が4つ並んだ。野心と巧妙に疲れた狂気の時代に全く明理を顧みず哀れな百姓たちのために戦った7人の侍の話。彼らは無名のまま風のように去った。しかし彼らの優しい心と勇ましい行為は今なお美しく語り伝えられている。彼らこそ侍だ。黒澤明が描く壮烈な叙事詩。彼らはこの旗のもとに戦った。こういうわけだ、これは田んぼの田の字。
Hello, I'm Thomas Carruthers.
Hello, I'm David Whiting.
And we've stumbled into a series, David. We've inadvertently stumbled into a series, which I think could be quite fun, and I think might be how I keep you for doing, because we recorded JFK ages ago. And then we wanted to do another episode, and I gave you free rein somewhat, and you said something possibly martial artsy, not really my field. Technically, I should have taken that as a as a thing of making it my field and being a good podcast host, but I didn't. And then we led, as all white people do, to going, okay, well, martial arts, it's same as Kurosawa. I do, because I have seen Rashomon and did enjoy Rashomon. I mean, I know nothing is as good as the joke in The Simpsons. I don't like foreign movies. You like Rashomon? I don't remember it that way, But one of my huge movie black hole, movies I've never seen, to say I love movies and all that sort of thing, is Seven Samurai. And it was,
Wow.
I know.
I really pulled a good one out of the hat there. Then,
yeah, indeed.
I can't believe I showed the Thomas Carruthers a new movie.
Indeed. And so I thought, okay. And then he mentioned doing Southpaw as well, and I thought, okay, because I didn't really want to do Southpaw before doing Raging Bull, because I love Raging Bull. And I thought, okay, let's do both. And then this gave me an excuse to make you watch Nixon, which by this time the Nixon episode's already come out. The other Oliver Stone 3-hour crazy political black and white throwing a load of conspiracy.
Be a great time.
I don't know. And then obviously we're going to pair this with Magnificent Seven, which I also haven't seen, because I, as much as I like many westerns, never been my genre. Western's never been a genre for me where I've gone into, Magnificent Seven isn't known as one of the lesser ones, but anyway, I'm rambling.
That's all right. Well, we can just watch the one with Chris Pratt and Denzel Washington in it if you really want.
I watched that in movies. I watched that in cinemas twice and fell asleep for whole hours. Because on in my college years, I used to not Rose Bruford College, my Pontefract College. I used to have to, again, there are mill workers listening to this going, oh yeah, but I used to have to wake up at
sounds real hard.
Yeah, I used to do 6 a.m. and then get the bus, and anyway. And so, my Fridays finished after 2 morning lessons. So I would then always go to a movie on the Friday. And if the movie wasn't in any way good or anything like that, I'd just immediately fall asleep and just take a huge nap. And, Magnificent. And I remember enjoying
out for the next 2 hours.
And I remember, so the worst example of this was falling asleep during Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and waking up after the transformation of Colin Farrell to Johnny Depp and going, what the fuck? What? I'm sorry, where did Colin Farrell go? So Magnificent Seven, the remake, was such a film that unfortunately failed the test twice. But But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about, well, arguably, you know, one of the great films of all time. So, David, what is your relationship?
Pretty much entirely, the same thing. I had heard of Akira Kurosawa as being this incredible director with a very unique style and kind of like a master of, you know, shot composition and just really good storytelling. So I was curious to see if this movie from, when was this? 1954? A 1954 release date. And I was curious if this like Japanese 50s movie would be able to like hold me. And it really did actually.
I mean, it's not, what's the opposite of derivative? Irritative? No, that's not what it is. But anyway, it's a poll. It's a calling card. You know, I mean, you are a huge Lord of the Rings guy, me less so. But you know, everything that follows.
You can see a lot of, you know, kind of like the different fantasy epics and, you know, great last stands. You can see a lot of that in this movie.
Or just something as simple as getting the team together.
I love a good getting the team together sequence, and it was really fun to watch, you know, kind of how they do that. It was funny as I was watching it. Lucy kind of chimed in, and I think we were about an hour and a half into the movie, and they'd only just gotten to the village. She was like, "Oh my god!"
Okay. But it's one of the. Did you know beforehand, before choosing this movie, that it was 3.5 hours long?
I didn't realize it was quite that long, but I was ready for it, and you know, I was actually kind of surprised by how well it managed to kind of keep my attention for that 3.5 hours.
Because David, I just realized this. And I'm including Nixon in this because we'll have recorded the next episode and then it will have come out. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. We have just done, this is our 4th 3.5 hour movie back to back to back. And you are a person who I have had multiple conversations with about disliking long movies. It feels like I'm Killers of the Flower Moon, JFK, Nixon, which we're going to record, and this. And it feels like I'm forcing you, Clockwork Orange style, to watch these long movies.
I'm enjoying them. I'm enjoying every one as it goes.
That does lead on to Nashville, which I do want us to do sometime. Again, I just pigeonhole you as my American friend. But you know,
if there's any good American political thrillers, we'll just throw me in there somewhere.
Go from there. But I'd had a Akira Kurosawa experience because I'd watched Rashomon. My film studies teacher in college, the wonderful Toby, huge fan of Kurosawa. I believe he had a Kurosawa mug. Anyway, big fan of Kurosawa, and he always recommended Rashomon and High and Low because Rashomon's only, and he knew that I liked long movies, so I don't think he was, you know, averting me from Seven Samurai. But it's only 90 minutes, and it is a very psychological movie, and he knew that I liked that sort of movie. So and he was right. It was a great, you know, calling card to start with. He also recommended High and Low, which is a thriller, which I've still yet to see because there's no good UK Blu-ray release. I'll spend my money. Just make it. You know,
he refused to stream on principle.
But I need to watch that because it's now going to be Spike's new movie with Denzel. So interesting remake. And we all know how great he is at remaking Asian cinema. Old Boy was a masterpiece.
Well, you know, they've already remade everything else. They might as well start going further afield.
Spike Lee joined. But so I did enjoy Rashomon a fair bit. In a way, I wish you'd have just recommended Seven Samurai because it's a pity, but I think there's a point to be made about the fact that Rashomon's 90 minutes and Ran, I believe, is also 3 hours, but because Kurosawa is a director, clearly, who knows how to utilize a runtime. Rashomon doesn't have to be 90 minutes. You know, it's not that he wasn't the great director of the time in that culture and in that cinema and working under Toho, who this same year had Godzilla. And the combination of the first Godzilla movie and Seven Samurai nearly bankrupted Toho. So and now they, you know, go on to be, you know, two of the most famous movies ever made.
I mean, I do have to say, watching it, it could not have been a cheap movie. I mean, oh my God.
It's not even about cheapness for me. It's about, shooting movies. Yeah, you change the cut. Yeah, let's do another take. You look at the village, Video Village, and you're like, oh, change this. Just the practicality of shooting black and white footage in 1954 or 1953 rather, and there was no dailies, no Video
Way to
Village.
know what you had.
They had to judge certain angles and shots using a tape measure. I mean, and then you're just throwing on top of that, because it's one thing to make an Ozu movie at this time and have these, well, not to negate what Ozu does, but those just static shots, the people walking in and out of frame, and they're beautiful in their own way. But to then just the mud and the horses and the people and the length and just how modern it still feels in its action and its presentation. This is an era of stand back and shoot, because it was practically one of the only ways to do it. And again, I love many of those epic stand back and shoot movies.
Yeah.
But this is such a, I mean, to be honest with you, not to negate one of the great films of all time, but it has many of the complaints that people have about action these days, which is that it's too cutty and really up close. Obviously, this works better than most movies, but you know what I'm saying?
Maybe at certain points during to hide some of the, kind of lack of training in like some of the action sequences. But up close and hard to read would be like the last thing I'd say about the shots in this movie. I mean, there are all these massive tableaus full of all kinds of stuff happening in them, and it's just kind of like hypnotic to watch in a way. I think take a scene like the sort of the funeral scene after the first samurai has been killed. It's such a clear kind of shot, like what's happening. You could take all of the words away and just show somebody a silent image of like this scene play out where I forget the name of the character, but the
one who's supposed to make us laugh.
Yes, the one who was supposed to make us laugh, who passed away.
Hayachi, the good-natured samurai, played by Minoru Kiyaki.
Yes, and then
this is why
Kikuchiyo like kind of stabs his sword into the the grave mound and sits down, and eventually you've got kind of the image of him running into the house and coming back out with the flag of the Seven Samurai, like sticking that into the roof of like the house right as the bandits arrive. And I think it's so clear, the emotion and the stakes of that scene and everything that's happening. You could take all of the sound and all of the dialogue away and show somebody just a silent image of that scene playing, and they would be able to beat for beat understand everything that's happening.
Oh, no, completely. I meant more in the sense of a kineticism, that there is there is a lot more. I believe Kurosawa also edited in part this film. And there is a kineticism and a dynamicism that wasn't present at the time of most, and is, again, this is done in some of the best filming of all time, but is overplayed now and is the modern form of doing things in many regards. And the closeness as well. There's no great zoom on many of these cameras. You had to be really in there in the mud with those horses. And again, I'm sure that this movie would have not gotten an RSPCA, no animals were harmed, different techniques in the 50s. But just the horses and just the amount of people. And the biggest thing for me, the weather, they're not weather machines.
They've shot in all manner of weather.
Well, David, it was supposed to be a summer shoot, and it was supposed to be quite easy, and everybody's outside and everything's nice. But as we've already discussed, the budget for this movie went over budget majorly, nearly bankrupted Toho in conjunction with Godzilla. So the production went into the winter. So by the time that they're filming all of the end final fight scenes, they're in the deep, heavy mud, rain, and sleet of winter. And they had to, heat up the mud afterwards because the cameras are getting stuck. Toshiro Mifune is getting stuck. People lost nails and fingernails. Kurosawa lost toenails,
Jesus.
And then you look at him here on this little image, and he's just the most quiet,
he's
shy.
Just an adorable little guy.
Yeah, he's just sat there very gently,
Yeah, hearing all that, I sure do feel bad for Mifune having to run around in that one piece.
Well, this everybody's in diapers, more or less. Not to be
Yeah.
culturally insensitive, but as good as a diaper.
But yeah,
when it
that's
comes
pretty
to-
much like a leather thong for most of the movie.
And let's dive straight into the movie, because I also bring back intermissions. I love an intermission. Everybody was everybody was talking about Killers of the Flower Moon, and it should have had an intermission and blah blah blah. I love an intermission. The film wound up going more than 4 times over its budget, with its production stretched to over 148 days of shooting.
Oh my God.
A fair amount. As the production process grew longer and longer, producers grew worried that Kurosawa was spending too much money on the film. As a result, production was closed down at least twice. Instead of arguing, Kurosawa simply left to go fishing, believing that the studio had already invested so much money into the film that they wouldn't simply scrap the film. And of course, he was right.
And he was fucking right.
A couple of 10-minute stretches again as the film. These are mainly from the first section of the film, and then as the second, obviously the second, as we go further and further into the battle, it goes longer. But I love, maybe my entire moment in the entire, well, no, I have 2, but anyway, Ronin, the Kembe, played by Takashi Shimura, who worked with Kurosawa again on Ikuru. I've seen the remake of the Kuru, but anyway, saving the child from the feet. And it is one of those, you talk about getting the gang together and that side of thing. What a great, I know everything about this guy. I know everything about this scene. And even his humility of, shaving off the top knot, which was the samurai,
one of the big samurai, yeah.
And he's like, no, it's okay. My vanity is not worth this child's life. Yep. And again, the subtlety of going because again, it's about choosing when to do it. Kurosawa can do the hold back and stand all the way over there and shoot from afar and go in and then go out, and then again slow motion. The slow motion here feels so.
It's thrown in.
It's
such interesting times, and it really, really works. It also makes me think of it for a 10-minute stretch I really liked. There was Kyuzo, played by Seiji Miyaguchi, the sort of like highly skilled supreme swordsman, and his sort of duel with wooden sticks against another samurai, and God declares it a draw. And he says, no. If we had done this for real, you'd be dead. And he's proven right by the end of that. And yeah, love that sort of 10-minute stretch, and just kind of the stillness that like gets just punctuated by like these totally different kind of physicalities. Another really like kind of cool detail of this movie, like the really strong like character presence for each person.
It comes from how the film began. The film began with Kurosawa originally intending to make a film. It was going to be more or less a day in the life of a samurai was his original idea all those years ago. And then this led to intense research. It was a heavy researcher. And then I feel like Paul Thomas Anderson. I'm going to write one movie. It's going to be about a guy. It's going to be really simple. And then it grows and it grows.
And then it explodes into a 3.5-hour epic about a battle in a village.
And it's the same thing here. You hear he's doing his research. And although it's not autobiographical in any way, shape or form, there are direct links from Kembe to certain samurai and that sort of thing. And you put all of that into this great melting pot. And well, as we said, you get one of the great epics. Not that I wouldn't want to see the movie, A Day in the Life of Kembe, but I don't think it would be on the magisterial legacy as this.
I want A Day in the Life of Kikuchiyo.
Yes, well, yeah. Team Jacob, Team Edward, more like Team Kikuchiyo, Team Kembe. Let's talk about Toshiro Mifune now, because although you haven't seen Rashomon, and I've seen clips of High and Low. This is Toshiro Mifune in a different register. He's not always this drunk, brash,
manic,
incredible
kind of
manic.
Points,
Before this point, David, he'd been known for his subtleties of performance, and
impressive.
exactly, yeah. No, I mean it's probably, his calling card, performance in regards to his career. It's just such a film of again, energy and dynamicism, and
Yeah.
and his
I mean,
final.
his monologue after they find sort of the salvaged armor that the peasants have been kind of collecting and hoarding, and the samurai kind of have the gall to like be shocked and offended that these people would collect these things. And at first, you really think, his kind of whole raving about how much he hates farmers, and then just the switch of like, and of course they're like this because you fucking assholes make them this way, like how could they not?
And the few times we cut back to Kembe and that slow realization on his face of what's happening, and then you're a farmer's son. And again, there is a lot of complexity in how it's presented, because although we are rooting for the samurai in this regard, the film doesn't shy away from the fact that there is another story going on somewhere else where the samurai are the villain and the bandits are helping them, or
the samurai are the bandits, pretty much. The lead bandit, for God's sakes, is dressed in a full suit of samurai armor.
It just so happens that in this case, they're probably calling themselves the bandit leader probably calls himself the samurai. Oh, for the love of barley.
Oh, for the love of barley. Barley.
But yeah, no, you already mentioned my other 10-minute stretch. My favorite is, of course, the Toshiro monologue, which comes kind of just before the end of the first, just nearly before the intermission. And so it's a nice, and then that leads into the actual end of the intermission, where Kembe puts the people in their place. He goes, no, and again, I don't want to get too political, but the idea of a small faction of people who only want to fight for their house and not think about the entire village,
the entirety.
You don't have to be too politically minded to see how that can still resonate.
How 50, that could translate elsewhere. Yeah.
70. It feels older, but it's only 70 years. I know 70 years is but like I'm so used to. You look at like Casablanca's celebrating I think it's coming on its 85th or something like that anniversary, and it feels so modern, and it doesn't. I think I lost actually a trivia round once because I put this down as a 40s movie rather than a 50s movie.
I mean, it does feel older than 50s. Like looking at when I saw that it was released in 1954, I was kind of surprised because it feels like a 45 or 46 sort of movie. And maybe that's just the difference in sort of like camera quality and shooting technique between America and Japan. It just feels older fashioned. But I think also I mean, it's just so stylized and so kind of like unique that it sort of feels like it stands off on its kind of own time frame.
I mean, when people talk about old movies being boring or whatever, and I get it. I'm not one of these hypocrite, one of these assholes. I am, but but you could pick 10 a penny of movies coming out in 1954, and there probably will be ones that suck. And if you watch the wrong, boring black and white movie that isn't shot with any dynamicism or is
it's just shot.
There's always been bad movies. There's always been bad movies, and there's always been good movies.
So, as it turns out.
And so it's all in there. The weirdly specific favorite parts of the film. Again, mainly I have them for the start. I think I'd probably be the opposite to your Lucy, in that I didn't. Did I prefer the first act? I really enjoyed getting the gang together.
I loved the getting the gang together sequence, and I forget the name of the young man who kind of turns into the apprentice there. Oh goodness!
Does she know the village girl? Does she know?
Katsuhiro Okamoto, played by Isao Kimura. Kind of having him stand next to the door frame with a stick to try and whack every new guy who comes in over the head.
Nobody would fall for this,
Nobody, no real samurai would fall for this trick. All right,
and again, you've got that great. It is the exact same as the Predator. You son of a bitch. When he comes in, he goes, I'm sorry, but you would, you know. He's like, you know, I'm sorry. I hope you understand. He goes, I understand. And these little tests that Kembe sets up. This isn't to say that I didn't enjoy the second half of the film, but it's a different beast, and I think leading into the back, because it gets to a certain point where it's not that you forget that the bandits are coming, but it's almost as if the bandits have moved on to a different town. They're still preparing and they're still getting ready and that sort of thing. And I think there's a moment when somebody says, you know, what if the bandits don't come? What if the bandits pick another town? And he says it almost disappointedly. And it's like, no, that's a good thing.
That would be a good thing, you idiot. That's what we want.
We're doing all this work, and you know, and then what if they don't even come?
I can relate to the feeling of, you know, prepping for that sort of thing, and then having it not happen can be kind of an anticlimax in real life. I can relate.
Yeah, it's all in there so gloriously. Tom's really specific favorite parts of the film. I've got a few. I mean, it's more of a line, but find hungry samurai, even bears leave the forest when they're hungry, and just an incredible setup. Because although it's quite metaphorical and that sort of thing, you know what we're looking for. We're looking for down on their luck people who will.
Yeah, we're looking for dudes that got no other choice but to come on out for some rice.
and again, I haven't watched Magnificent Seven yet, but I'm just a wild guess that there's going to be an overwhelming sentimentality that leads them to help the town, which I could. And that is, of course, the joy of this film. That sentimentality is there. One of my favorite parts of the entire film is just the subtlety of them having that town meeting, and now Kembe's holding a child, and it's never addressed. You know, it's never brought up again. He is just part of the town, and he's part of the family, and it's never then brought up again in part of the battle. And Toshiro's still in there, you know. Yes. That is not his baby that he has to keep care of.
It's
just there is a lot of subtlety that is lost in the intervening 70 years for the most part.
Weirdly specific part I enjoyed was watching Kikuchiyo kind of training up the sort of the town militia, and clearly getting a kick out of entertaining the children.
It's great. Well, you know me, David. I love children and entertaining children. So the minute I was like, he loves the kids. This is great. He
loves the kids. He's the best guy. And it makes his kind of monologue hit so much harder later, because you realize that he sees himself in those kids. You know, he finally gets to be the big hero he always wanted to be growing up, you know. So he's really just eating up that adulation.
The entertainment. And you could have done with a few more scenes. There's your change. Add a few more of those.
Just add more of Kikuchiyo hanging out with the town children.
The chopping. I mean, another favorite part. This has a comedy cut that you'll see next week in the next Netflix comedy film of him going to the samurai chopping wood. And he goes, I've killed a few, How about 20 or 30 bandits? And he misses the wood and he turns and he cuts away. I mean, that is the same edit that's in Dumb and Dumber, you know, like, and it's here in the middle of this grand, epic, you know, quote unquote, boring foreign movie.
It's got some great humor, some really good humor, man. And it's funny as hell. Like, oh God, I loved it. Oh.
So will this lead to more Kurosawa for you?
I think so. Yeah, I'd like to see, because I had heard that Toshiro Mifune is supposed to be pretty damn amazing, and I do know that he generally did like some more dramatic stuff outside of this. I'm curious.
You're a big Shakespeare guy, so I presume you'll be wanting to watch Throne of Blood, which is Macbeth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now that I know it's out there. I'm also curious to like see, because I can't remember if it's Toshiro Mifune who played him, but Akira Kurosawa did another movie about Miyamoto Musashi, kind of a legendary samurai figure.
Yojimbo?
Maybe, yeah, that's the one.
Yojimbo's the other Toshiro Mifune samurai Akira
Yeah.
Kurosawa collaboration. Well, no, you could say the Throne of Blood. Anyway.
I'd like to watch that one as well. It's sort of something I like to see in the Akira Kurosawa movies, which isn't necessarily like a specific part, but I like the instruction he gives his actors of like giving their characters a repetitive gesture that they always kind of do.
Yeah.
So like in this one, it would have been for like Kanbei Shimada, it's the rubbing of the head, like the back of his head. And I think in Yojimbo, it's kind of like the shrugging of the shoulders to get ready.
Right. Yeah.
And in this, like for Toshiro Mifune's character, it was the scratching of like his chest,
constantly. Yeah.
And it's interesting because it really, really works on camera to very quickly kind of communicate very complex kind of emotions and thoughts going on in these characters. Just that kind of repeated. Anytime you saw like, Kanbei have like this sort of tense talk or like having to make a big decision, just kind of that return to the rubbing of the head, and then he sort of moves on, and it says so much in such a short moment, and it's really interesting.
Again, we're 70 years away from it being annoying. Like we're in that great period where these things are revolutionary. But whereas you then look at, just one example that jumps out, Amsterdam, and just Christian Bale's tick-ridden performance, and I thought, Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah, it's never becomes the focus of the scene, I guess, or like the entire character is this movement, which I don't know. I just kind of want to see if how many I can spot in the Kurosawa movies, because it is nice. It's not the annoying thing that I think a lot of character actors do nowadays, where the whole character becomes about their tics and fidgets.
Can he have a limp? This might be bullshit, but I heard a story recently about Flower Moon, which is that Leo wanted to do a limp and said to Marty, I think he's got a limp, and then from the war, and then he said, no, Bob's already doing a little limp. It's like everybody just raced to do a little limp because it's the easiest way to communicate,
To just give yourself some history.
Yeah, it's like give a little what else have I got here? Again, another comedy cut when they're having it's the start of a very, very serious scene, but when the big Toshiro Mifune monologue, and they throw the spear out, and the guy, and we just cut to outside the tent, not the tent, the cabin or whatever, and then at the end of that, you're a farmer's son, aren't you? I really, really did like that. Kids rushing after Toshiro after that monologue again, and even then, as much as I love a movie where a guy, is great with kids and everybody loves the kids, I love the moment where he gets angry at them. And he goes, no, I can't today. I can't do magic today.
Can you show us a magic trick?
And he goes, no,
leave me alone.
Is there a greater moment in cinema history than in Jaws when the kid mimics Roy Scheider? Oh, I love Jaws so much. We're pouring out the red. Maybe you ought to let that breathe a little.
I'm the chief of police. I can do whatever I want.
And David is currently dressed as Richard Dreyfuss. They're all going to die. Anyway, now we're talking about Jaws.
Anyway.
Do you have, I know the answer is a no, but do you have any resistance to black and white movies, to older quote unquote movies, to foreign movies in that regard? Is there a part of you that just starts with as a stumbling block? Because I'll be honest, it was harder writing notes for this. Even now, I'm a boring white guy who knows nothing culturally. I still have my BFI booklet open with all of the names of the samurai.
Yeah, I think if I hadn't already heard so much about how Akira Kurosawa is this amazing foreign director and how his shot composition is unlike anything else, and I think if I had gone into this with no knowledge of Akira Kurosawa or the nature of his movies or anything, it would have definitely been harder to convince myself to sit down and watch 3.5 hours of a foreign 1950s movie. but this one managed to sweep me up pretty quickly. Like the story is strong and the characters are strong, and the way that, Akira Kurosawa shoots these things really draws you into the emotion and the stakes of the scenes, with this kind of exaggerated like emotions of the characters and the huge kind of performances that they give that feel like just over the line of naturalistic kind of thing. It makes everything really clear and easy to read and kind of draws you into the story. And it's just really well paced, I found. So like, in spite of it being a black and white movie, in spite of it being foreign and kind of old, like, yes, there's a bit of a stumbling block there. But then as soon as I started watching, I was kind of swept along quite quickly.
I mean, it's all of that slight over the topness of performance and that sort of thing is balanced not only culturally, like the weeping, at the funeral isn't over top. That is cultural. How these, the what's it called? Not weeping.
Keening.
Thank you. And also it's balanced out by the immense practicality and tactility of all of the sets and everything that we're seeing. So, Toshiro Mifune, going over the top, not over the top really, but in his monologues and his big speeches, if that was on a set or something like that, I don't know, it could feel more staged and it could feel more, but you're putting him in the literal mud. And
you've had an hour and a half of him already being this kind of wild and erratic, over the top figure. So it feels entirely reasonable that, of course he bursts out into a monologue right now and rails against the injustices of the samurai and how much he hates farmers.
Yeah,
because it's kind of what you've come to expect from him. You have that whole another great 10-minute sequence. Actually, now that I think about it, his family lineage papers when he comes stumbling in drunk, and they basically all make a joke out of him, and he eventually passes out in the hay after playing.
You're 13. You're 13.
Yeah, after playing Keep Away, with the samurai. You're a 13-year-old boy, huh?
Yeah, all of the comedy of this that makes that final, him getting shot, and you think that's it.
Devastating when he goes, and
he gets up and he goes through and he, final stab into the mud, and it's the great, again, we've seen it 100 times after, all the way up to Ben Affleck, Bruce Willis in Armageddon. The person who we've, at the start we laughed at them, or in Bruce Willis's case, oh, he's an angry dad, when's he going to learn his lesson? And he has to learn the lesson at the final hurdle. And that might be the first time anybody has compared Seven Samurai, one of the greatest films of all time, to Armageddon. We're going to take our Dad.
Only on the Carruthers, Leggetter, and Whoever podcast.
Would you find such riveting commentary? We're going to take our first break, and then we'll be back to discuss the rest of what's left to discuss of Seven Samurai, indeed. Yeah. And we're back with more Seven Samurai, and I'm going to speak in staccato for the next hour.
Sounds good.
I love another little moment I forgot to mention. When the samurai is brought by Kembe to tell the rest of the warriors about, trying to tell them to speak to their children and see their wives tonight, and the face of absolute acceptance of, so it's the final battle.
It's time.
Best single minutes. I've got a few. Just the back when they go back to the elder, and if the samurai come, our girls will fall for them. If the bandits come, they will cut off your heads. We will worry about the girls later. And I believe that's the same scene where they come to him and say, "We're so sorry, we got 7." And he said, "Yeah, I thought we'd need 10, but if I told you 10, we'd have ended up with 15." Again, it's I like very small. I love Tajiro in the waterfall grabbing a fish.
Yeah. I love his moment of when they're kind of walking on the forest path on their way in, and Mifune manages to sneak around, kind of catch them by surprise by appearing in front of them in the middle of the forest, then marches off on ahead of them. Just kind of good-naturedly chuckle and follow.
which leads us into single minute. Best line whilst we're here, and we were born to suffer. It's our fate. Very. I mean, most of these read as just the most profound poetry, and then
something straight out of like Hagakure or something, Book of the Samurai.
Yeah. And yet they're somewhere in the middle of this grand war epic.
Yeah. There was I like her single lines, enjoyed kind of as the funeral's happening for the first of the samurai. Yeah. You said he would be a gift in hard times, but the hard times have only just begun.
Yeah. I'm paraphrasing here, but at that funeral, when they go, he was the one who was supposed to keep us happy or make us laugh, and now he's. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's the screenplay format for the rest of the world, and Yeah. Hey guys, hey, why are we so glum? And then, and he gets shot, and then he falls over. Who's gonna tell me shitty jokes now, Paul? You can't die, Paul. Come on. And there's so many bad versions of this, and here it is, just again the cultural part of it as well, but it's all played so not stony faced exactly, but well, some of them are stony faced and some of them are overwhelmed with emotion. But that was his job, that was his role. He was the one who was going to make us laugh, and now
keep the morale up. And now he's gone, and it's only just begun.
There is an overwhelming sadness to the. I mean, obviously, half of them die, but more than half of them die. But the final conclusion of the film, and we get the great little moment of the rice and them planting again, and everybody's happy and everything's great. And then we go up to Kembe on the mountain, and he goes, "No, we have lost again," and that paralleling of earlier, we have won again, and it feels like the first time he's had that revelation of none of these wins have ever been for us, and it's always been for the other people, and yet every time that has been enough for me through the years. But now I realize that every time I have won for other people, I have lost something inside myself. Yeah. And
yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of that whole honor code, chivalry, Bushido thing kind of taken to its natural conclusion, which is, if you spend all of your time obsessing over death and dying well, eventually that kind of becomes all that you do. It becomes your whole life is just watching people come and go.
Kill Bill, the old Klingon proverb that starts Kill Bill. He who goes to
seek revenge should start by digging two graves.
Two graves, yeah. Is that the old Klingon proverb? It starts with revenge is a dish. It does. It says old Klingon proverb as a anyway. Who knows? But no. But combining two aliens there.
Yeah, Mork and Mindy famously Rose show Trek. About.
That's who they needed to cheer them up.
That's who they needed to bring in on the Enterprise. Where was that episode?
Yeah. We haven't talked yet at all, really, about Katsushiro and his semi-romance with Shino, the village girl, and how that and how that takes its form, and her father's dismissal of her, and you are devastated and you are ruined and all that sort of thing. We've not talked about that sort of thing, Jenny. Again, feels like a perfect subplot in a 3.5-hour movie. Do you feel that at the end of this movie, Katsushiro goes back to Shino? Do you think he moves on town? Do you think he stays a samurai, or do you think this one experience was enough and he's learned everything he has to learn?
No, I think he leaves from there. I think they make it pretty clear with her kind of rejecting him to return to her life in the village. They do ultimately come from two different worlds, and now the job has been done. The samurai move on. They go to find the next fight, basically. And I think, he's definitely gotten a cold dose of reality of what it really means to be a samurai, and that but yeah, I think he's kind of come too far now. Like he's too far gone. He's in the life now, and she's very much not. And yeah, I think he goes off with Kanbei and, you know, continues to be a samurai, is what it seems like. Yeah, personally, I think yeah, at the end of this, he's definitely been awoken to the realities of war and death and that and violence and that sort of thing. And I think yeah, and the girl Shino is just too embarrassed to, you know, to love him anymore. Sort of thing.
I mean, it goes into, you know, it again, perfect trope for this sort of film of the guy who's excited for war, and you know, and the tantalizing aspects
romance of it.
Yeah, and then get there, and because I think one of the great thing, and again, I'm criticizing Magnificent Seven without having seen it, but there is very little romance of would you say that this film romanticizes? I mean, now we're equating it to war, which this film isn't about in so many ways. But do you think there is a romanticism of the life of a samurai, or do you think that this is a rather
I think there's definitely a romanticization of it. I think this movie romanticizes it less than something like, say, The Last Samurai does. And yeah, I think it does acknowledge the kind of harsh reality that the samurai were oftentimes little more than bandits for hire, essentially. But yeah, I think the very nature of film means you can't put war on screen without romanticizing it to some degree. Even a movie like Saving Private Ryan, which is ostensibly like very much an anti-war kind of movie, sort of.
You still fist bump when the sniper
you're still excited to like see the guys win. Like the very nature of film, it romanticizes whatever you put on screen because it's in a movie, and that in itself makes it romantic and exciting. So yeah, I think this movie's not going out of its way to romanticize this, but ultimately you are still cheering when they finally drag that guy off of his horse and stab him to death in the middle of the town. You know, like you're rooting for them to win the fight, sort of thing. And just by that, you are romanticizing it.
It kind of sneaks up on you how many die because you don't. Apart from I guess Toshiro Mifune, none of them have clean cut, and obviously Hayachi earlier, who has his own funeral and that sort of thing. It's not necessarily clean cut. Oh, they died. Like you see the strike, or you see the arrow or the light, and they disappear for a while, but you don't get a full blown confirmation of any of the deaths until you turn around and you're there with Kenbei in the mud, and you go and you're counting, and it's like, oh yeah, no, it's those three. Yeah,
he's gone. Yeah. And I think that kind of lends itself to like the non-romanticization of it. I guess like the romantic option would be to give every character, like every major character death, a beat to like register the audience and to really stay with that character as they kind of lose and like die finally. But
the bandits are here.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. They're fighting a battle against, you know, innumerable odds. They've died, and you know, in the middle of a fight, in the middle of a battle, there is no time for you to kind of look down and go, oh God, my friend, like all the times we shared together, because you're in the middle of fighting, you know. You kind of, bummer. You sort of see him go down, and then you turn back to the dude who's trying to stab you in the face and get back to it, sort of thing. You know?
I didn't say bummer, I said bubba, as in Forrest, when he literally takes a moment in the middle of a war.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Saying, yeah, it is a bummer. I agree.
Yeah, the brutality of death in the middle of the horrible strictures of war that we set ourselves is a bummer. Yes. I don't know if I actually have any changes. Did you have any changes, David?
No. I think everything that's in there is good and adds to the story, adds to the pace. It's in spite of being such a long movie, it feels like a very tight kind of movie in a way. Like everything that's there needs to be there in a way.
I think it's helped along in its pace. Whereas, because we talked about it, Killers of the Flower Moon is you know, loose in some ways and doesn't have, by choice, any typical narrative plotting. Whereas Seven Samurai is built, when we're doing the scenes of meeting people, you know that they're going to make seven, they're going to get seven people.
They're going to get seven, yeah.
It's all building up to a battle that we know is coming, and then after the battle, some of them will have died. And so
it's certainly, this is much more formulaic. It makes it formulaic before this formula was really a thing.
True.
Which is why I think this movie kind of stands out as something, you know, kind of like one of the greatest of all time in a way, because it did establish that formula of like getting the gang together for the climate. You know, you see the peasants in their wretched state, you establish the stakes, you gather the gang together, you find like all these legendary characters who are going to, you know, save the day, and then it's all building to the battle. So it definitely helps the pacing. But I guess within that, there's no unnecessary scenes or stuff that just kind of is like there for flavor in a way. Whereas I think like in the newer sort of modern remaking of Magnificent Seven with like Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt and all of them, there are a lot of scenes of just kind of like the cowboys hanging out with one another, and you know, cracking wise about like all these idiot farmers sort of thing, which can be fine and fun for a character beat, but when it's just over and over again and it's really just like a 5-minute scene to deliver a couple gags and then move back into the plot, it starts to become quite apparent and boring. So much more is told from Kembe holding a child in that meeting than any like 15 any
minutes
scene of him meeting the child and like having a moment.
Three 5-minute scenes where he's doing he's making his rice or something, and the kid's like, "Can I have some rice?" "No, this is my rice." And then he gives him a little bit of the rice, and then the next scene is helping him out. And again, I did the joke earlier of like, "Oh my God, he's in the burning building." You know, it's just the subtleties, the tremendous subtleties. And no, I agree. A few more fun facts. When asked to describe what kind of film he made, Akira Kurosawa responded, "A movie as rich as a buttered steak topped with grilled eel."
Tight.
Sounds delicious.
That sounds delicious, yeah.
So this was Toshiro Mifune's alleged favorite of his own films. But he named Kikuchio specifically as his favorite role because he was able to, quote unquote, be himself. So,
but it seems like they kind of realized in the writing of this that they had 6 really sober, stoic kind of characters that just were boring in a way. They needed kind of that 7th person to be that radical element. So it seems like they really did just kind of give Mifune like just kind of creative license to be like, hey, look, this guy needs to be wild and erratic and different from the 6 other guys we've got that are all stone-faced samurai. Kind of go in on it. And I think that's sort of like, I mean, that's a really talented character actor's dream, is to just kind of be given that free license, you know.
But the joy of the character, well, not the joy, pardon me, the opposite of the joy, but the depth of the character comes from also giving that wild, humorous, comic relief at many times at the point, giving him the serious farmer's, backstory, and the balance of that.
Yeah, his tragic kind of upbringing that led to his sort of state here.
Akira Kurosawa designed a registry of all 101 residents in the village, creating a family tree to help his extras build their characters and relationships to each other. Again, I always read this sort of shit, and it's like, okay, I can really tell. But
I'm sure it was great for those extras, you know.
And I think it can be seen a little bit in those moments, like the end of just before the intermission of anybody who lives on this side of the river, come with me. And you see those 5 people in that sort of reprobate, and it was like, okay, all right. And again, that moment here, look, more for me in the current political landscape, it really took me for a loop. And the fact that is given the weight of the intermission. You know, I always talk about, Once Upon a Time in America, and the intermission of that is, I think it comes at the 2-hour 10 mark, and there's only 1 hour and 30 minutes left. But that's the perfect point for that intermission, because that is where you need 5 minutes to catch
absorb.
Yeah. Whereas, sorry, well, now we're talking about different filmmakers, but Sergio Leone, when that first got sent around cinemas, some people were doing it at the midpoint and just cutting it, and just and then just letting people leave, and then coming back in, and then there would be the grand into the next scene. So near the
Jesus Christ.
Well, they had this with Flower Moon as well. There were cinemas across the country, across your country, not ours, but across America, who were doing forced intermissions. Not forced, I can't think of the right word to say it, but like putting in an intermission into that movie where there is nowhere designed for an intermission to be. And intermissions are coming back. By this time the film will have come out, but The Brutalist, which is apparently one of the best films of the year, has an intermission. Why do you think intermissions have fallen out of favor in projection? Because it's not that films have gotten shorter, because people always talk about not liking long movies, and then Endgame was what, 3 hours and 8 minutes or something, but anyway,
I think they fell out of favor partly because the cinema became less of like an event to go to in the way that like the theater is. I think with these earlier movies, it was an event to go to the movie theater, to see a movie. So I think there was some of the pomp and circumstance that you get in theater. And that was also at the time, everybody's kind of cultural, relation to going to see something was you were going to the theater. So I think, for audiences of the time, it would have been kind of expected. It's like, oh, this is about as long as a play. There should be an intermission somewhere in the middle, Whereas I think as time went on, the cinema just became kind of another activity you could kind of go do. You're just going to catch a movie. And so it became less of an event, and there was less demand for that sort of intermission. And now I think the way that the movie industry is going, with streaming kind of overtaking everything and theaters sort of fighting to stay alive, you have to turn it into an event again. It has to be something that you don't get by watching it on Amazon on your couch.
Well, this is the thing. Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon are the same length as this movie. Neither have a intermission, and I think that is largely down to the fact that those movies, as much as they were given theatrical, deals to get Scorsese on board, were not made from a company standpoint to be
in a movie theater.
Yeah. So when you're watching Apple TV at home, your intermission can be whenever you want. Doesn't matter.
Whenever you feel like it. Yeah.
Poor Molly Cobb is slowly dying, and you're like, pause. Yeah. Go. Do you want to go? I'm going to go take a huge shit. I don't care. I have so little faith in people. I'm sorry. I remember so clearly going to watch The Irishman in cinemas in Philadelphia, and the place was filled, and there was still that expectation of a long movie. But this is the thing, it's not like long movies have ever gone away. As we said, you look at the 10, adjusted for inflation, the 10 biggest movies of all time remain Avatar 2, Infinity War, these incredibly Endgame, these incredibly long movies by certain
Lord of the Rings. I mean, one of my favorites. One of my favorites out there. Famously, like one of the most painfully long movies.
Not even extended. Not even extended.
It's the theatrical releases. Are long as hell. And I think audience expectation, that there will always be an audience that is willing to go there and sit through a long movie. I think attention spans have changed.
This is why I love living in London, because there are so many great revival houses, but I'll shout at the great Prince Charles Cinema. And I look now at the schedule of what's coming on at the Prince Charles, and Seven Samurai was coming on, but it was coming on in 2 months from now. And I thought, how ideal, that would have been an ideal first watch for me to actually sit down, nowhere to, no free. I mean, obviously.
Well, maybe we make a plan anyways and go check it out just for fun. just for the hell of it. They should re-release Nixon. Bring Nixon. I love that movie.
It's a great,
Let's
great.
call up the Prince Charles Cinema. Let them know they need to adjust their schedule to meet the podcast.
I will announce. I will do
Pull
an
some
introduction.
strings.
I will do an introduction to Nixon. Everybody talks about Oliver Stone's great theatrical, political movie JFK. What they don't talk about is his other theatrical, his other political movie Nixon.
Everybody talks about corruption in politics nowadays, but I want to talk about corruption in politics back in the day.
Yeah. I want to talk about Anthony Hopkins giving one of the great performances ever, even though he looks and barely sounds like Nixon at all. But I was going to say that's our next episode. It's our next episode. It's already come out. But the wonderful Seventh Samurai. Any final thoughts, David, on Akira Kurosawa's full-blown masterpiece?
Yeah, loved it. I mean, pretty much everything we've already said. I think it's great. I think it's an excellent introduction to sort of like foreign cinema. If you're looking for like your first foreign movie to watch, I think this is a pretty good start.
It's an ideal way in on three different types of movies that people are resistant to nowadays, which is foreign films, black and white movies, and movies over 2.5 hours long.
That are long. Yeah.
And it's an ideal way in on all three.
Yeah.
And and we are going to be pairing this with the David Whiting double feature series with the original Magnificent Seven, Steve McQueen, Yul Brynner, Charles Bronson, which again I've never seen. Are you a Western guy, David, at all?
I like a cheeky Western. I wouldn't say I like. I haven't really watched the proper Westerns. The sort of the Clint Eastwood era of Western movies. I tend to like sort of like reflectionist Westerns. It's sort of more modern Westerns that are reflecting on a genre that's kind of come and gone and seen a revival in a way.
I mean, my favorite Western is undoubtedly Butch Cassidy, which was the first quote-unquote revisionist Western. So I've kind of set myself...
I maintain that one of the greatest Western movies of all time is Rango, with Johnny Depp playing that lizard. Yeah. I think that movie...
If only for the Fear and Loathing cameo.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you very, very much, David. The wonderful Seven Samurai, and we will have done Nixon, and we will be back with Magnificent Seven. Again, we live in a void.
It's just a wild time out here.
I was recording. We're obviously recording months and months ahead. I was with another co-host, the wonderful Lauren, and we manifested at the end of the podcast of The Whale, and because she was talking about the possibility of a new man in her life, and I said, I've created a new philosophy of therapy because this podcast is released and you're already with him. It's magic. It's magic. No, it's great stuff. We didn't do specific Halloween costume, but again, that would get us both cancelled. So it's probably a good thing. Ba 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 ba.